Psalm 23, verse 4. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Welcome to Devries Ministries. Now, David is singing about the gift of the shepherd's presence. Just a wee reminder that David was a desert shepherd, and it's actually through this lens that we look each week at Psalm 23 from the desert shepherd's perspective. Now, the desert is a place of intense heat and bright light, but it's also a place of great darkness and bitter coldness. So when David writes darkest valley, it's a metaphor for the harshest moments of life. David is saying that the good shepherd walks into the deepest and the darkest valleys with his sheep, which means his shepherd, God, walks with him. He walks with you, and he walks with me into the deepest valleys, the darkest valleys of our lives. Now, the rod and the staff, David said, brings him comfort. The rod and the staff were used for protection. The staff could be used as a weapon against wild animals or enemies seeking to destroy and kill. But it could also be used as a walking stick, used to prod for guidance, to keep the sheep safe, to keep them moving forward. Now, the rod and the staff brought David comfort. They were comfort because they were guidance and protection, even in the darkest valley. Now, our shepherd, God, may not always use his power to keep us out of trials and troubles, but his presence and his power, well, they will always be with us, with David, with you and me, to keep us through our trials and troubles. God himself promised, I will never desert you, nor will I ever forsake you. And he means what he says, and he says what he means. David praises God for these words because he could walk through a dark valley, perhaps even death itself, fearlessly because he knew that the Lord walked with him. David knew firsthand what that looked like, and it's why he boldly proclaimed this truth. I have a friend who knows the same truth firsthand. And she boldly can proclaim the same truth as well. So today we're going to do something a little different, and I've invited my friend Shannon to come on the podcast with me because she, like David, like I just stated, can state boldly what David proclaimed. So hi, Shannon.
Hello.
And don't be afraid, Shannon. She's not afraid at all. She is. So I just thought to help you hop in here, I would just ask you some questions and then you'll share with us.
Sure.
So Psalm 23, verse 5, though I walk through the dark valley, I will fear no evil, for your rod and your staff are there to protect me, and they comfort me as well. And so the first question that I would have for you is, Shannon, have you walked through a dark valley? And if the answer is yes, and I know it's yes, can you share with us what that dark valley looked like, what it was?
Right. I've been through a few dark valleys, I guess. It started, I guess, with the birth of my son, who was born at 27 weeks and was very sick. And our world really changed, and we had to face the fact that he might not make it. And several times I had to say goodbye to him because the doctors had told me he wasn't going to survive. And in that time, I had no other choice but to lean on God to get through it because I was completely helpless to what was going on with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was the first real dark spot in my adult life that I had to really trust in God to get me through that time. And then after he finally got well and got better and off to school, my husband was diagnosed with lung cancer. And after a 7-month battle, he died. And that really was the deepest, darkest point of my life. But through it all, leaning on my faith was the only way to be able to survive that and help my children survive that experience.
Yeah. So that actually is a very dark valley. And yeah. When you think about them, can you well, first of all, I just want to reiterate the fact that David wrote this psalm for the living, and he didn't write it for the end. And it was your testimony, I think, to me. You told me that when your husband passed away, it was peaceful. It was peaceful. And in the tragedy of it all, that's a gift that you cherish to this day. Yes.
Yeah,
And
sure.
but this psalm was written for the living, which means, my friend Shannon, you were walking through the dark valley, and you had the shadow of death near you. And looking back, can you see God in it? When did you recognize God in it? Was it during your dark valley, or was it afterwards? Yeah, just can you speak to that?
Yeah. When Ben was sick, I would say that I wasn't as close to God. I ended up having to lean on him because I had no other choice.
It's incredible.
But as he got better, I could see the strength and the bond that my husband and I had gained over his sickness, and the miracle that he is now today, for sure.
Your son.
Yeah, it's just incredible. We were told he wasn't going to live, and now he's a vibrant, almost 11-year-old.
11-year-olds. Yeah.
Super smart and just healthy. And
So looking back at that valley of death, do you remember feeling God, seeing God, whatever it is? Use whatever word you need to use.
I do. I don't ever recall feeling like God was not there.
Okay.
I do remember feeling like he was quiet, but I remember feeling him still present.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes actually perfect sense.
Right. Like I remember as Ben got sicker, thinking like, why aren't you moving? Like, why aren't you helping him? As a mother, watching your child suffer is one of the most hard things to do. And I remember thinking, like, what are you doing here? You know, I know you're here. I know you're listening, because I remember I would say I'd pump and pray.
Yeah.
Because there was a pumping room, and we had to have milk for the babies, especially the preemies. It was important to have, milk for them. And I remember I'd go into the pumping room and I would pump and pray.
Yeah.
Just that.
That's incredible. You need to write a book called Pump and Pray or something like that.
Right? Where you're just helpless. And I just had to lay it all on the line, saying, like, I don't know what you're doing here. I don't know how I'm going to get through this as a mother, but it's all on you, God.
Yeah. So you didn't understand.
No.
You didn't necessarily hear him.
No.
But you knew.
Yeah.
You knew, and so you went through it. And so you can look back on Ben, who's now a vibrant 11-year-old boy, and proclaim the promise that I went through. You didn't stop there.
No.
God brought you through it.
Yeah.
And then another tragedy.
Yeah. And
comes along.
I do believe that the trials with Ben were preparing me for what I was going to face with John. I do believe God spared my son because he wasn't going to spare my husband.
Okay.
And I see so much of Ben in him. So I do believe that there is a huge purpose to that time in my life. The difference when John got sick, my relationship with God was deeper. And when we received his diagnosis, my prayers went from save him to help me through this. So we stopped praying for healing almost immediately. We prayed for provision and for comfort and for the ability to shepherd our children through such a tragic time.
Yeah.
And God did that. He provided the people we needed. He provided the peace in the circumstance. For me, I know for John, it was a horrible struggle to know that his life was coming to an end and he was going to have to leave his family. But he provided him enough peace to plan things and to write letters to our children and to have conversations about the future. And that's pretty special that John had the ability to push through and to think of those things for us in the future. And I see God's hand in all of that, because he could have completely shut down we could have fallen apart completely. But he gave us the strength to work through the whole process from beginning to end gracefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, I just sit here and I listen to you, and Shannon, you have a story to tell, and it needs to be told, because even just in these couple minutes, what you're telling me is that, oh, by the way, did you actually read Psalm 23 during that time with John, or was it just the reality of who God was with you because that's who he is?
That's who he is to me. Like, I don't know if it's just my history, being born into faith, being through hard times as a kid. We've experienced a little bit here and there. My relationship with him has always been super personal, and even if I haven't shared it with a lot of people, it's something I've always felt him present.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, bottom line, Shannon, you went through the darkest valley in your life, and you really went through it twice. And the reason that I asked you to come on here with me today is because when I think about somebody who can stand up and truly say and be a witness that the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want, especially or even in those really dark, hard, horrific moments of life, I think of you. I think of you. And I just love that you are willing to share with us the faithfulness of God, because I don't think it's easy to see it. I think that it's, on a human level, it's easy to be angry, be scared.
I'm angry and scared sometimes.
Yeah. And that's natural. And you, by the way, are allowed to feel those things. Yeah. But Shannon, that's not who I see in you, which is why you're here with us today. I see a woman whose testimony is even though I walk through, and you are not shy about it. A little side note, my friends who are listening, Shannon and I went out for lunch together, and we were in a restaurant, and she has a beautiful, strong voice, and she was sharing this kind of stuff with me in the restaurant, and milestones to be exact, and I'll tell you what, there is not a person in that restaurant that didn't hear, as she was speaking to me today, about the faithfulness of God, and I just needed her to share that with you. Because it's beautiful, and it's a testimony of who he is, and he doesn't change. So Shannon, are there any last things that you would like to share with us before we cut it off for the day?
I think as I've looked more into suffering in the Bible in the last little while, I find a lot of comfort in the fact that God tells us that we'll suffer, and it has a refining power on us.
Yeah.
And that as we go through our suffering, we're called to lean into him, and that's the only way we can develop that intimate, true relationship with him, is by going through these trials and really, really leaning on who he is to get us through it.
Yeah.
And I think the purpose of our suffering is to eventually meet up with him and have that intimate relationship come to completion in the end. And
that's what you are seeing happening in your life.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And it gives me great comfort to know that this is not for nothing.
No.
He comforts me, and I can comfort others, and we're called to just draw close to him in these hard times. And I think that's really what propels us forward in a relationship with him.
Yeah. And I'm just going to say it one more time. And the reason that you are here today is because you can say that. You can say that, and you can tell us all that the God who promised, who would walk you through, not keep you in it, but walk you through it, has been the God who saved you and was with you and comforted you and is still leading you today as you still try to figure it out. Your life story is not over yet. No. And I hope that we can work together and we can get it out there. And if you're listening, you need to know Shannon's story. So reach out to her, ask her questions or whatever. But thank you, Shannon. Is there anything else you'd like to add? No, she's good. She's good, everybody. So thank you, Shannon. And thank you for being brave. And we will talk to you again. David is reminding us that the shepherd's presence is always with us, even when we feel like there is darkness all around us, or when we feel alone. And my friend Shannon, thank you, Shannon, for sharing with us, but Shannon shares the same testimony. And she walked one of her darkest valleys when her son Ben was born. She was able to lean on God, she told us, even though she couldn't hear him or necessarily see him. But she told us that she knew that he was there. So she pumped and prayed. That has an amazing ring to it, by the way. Pumped and prayed. And her shepherd, he brought her through. And then she told us that when they received the horrifying news that her beloved John was not going to recover, her words to me are amazing. And let me just remind you, she said that they prayed that their shepherd would lead them through this dark, dark valley. And why? Why did she pray that? Well, she prayed that because, you see, God was faithful with Ben. And if he was faithful with Ben, then she was led to believe, why would he not be faithful with John and her in their dark valley? You see, he was her personal shepherd, and he was faithful. So what dark valley are you facing today? What dark valley? Are you willing to think about David and Shannon's testimony of their personal shepherd? The personal shepherd of David and Shannon is your personal shepherd, and he's my personal shepherd as well. And he will, like for them, be faithful. He'll be faithful. And he will bring us through the darkest valleys, because that's who he is. That's Shannon's testimony. He does it because that's who he is. Thank you, Shannon, from the bottom of my heart, for being so real and honest and raw with us today. And I pray that each of us can learn from your words. And from there, go on and look for and lean on our shepherd, just like you did. Just like you did. Amen.